for is apparently going to be a quarterback derby that Lincoln Riley is just going to continue to walk out. Okay? Because on top of talking about a couple of kids coming down with the virus, he said, look, I believe in both Spencer Rattler and Tanner Mordecai. Given this quote to ESPN, this is a different year for us at quarterback. We had a Baker for 3 years and had a great run with him. It's been so many years in a row that we've had senior quarterbacks. We're excited for the potential of having a quarterback for multiple years. Both Tanner Mordecai and Spencer Rattler, we think, are tremendous young prospects. If they weren't, we probably would have brought in another transfer. These guys are ready to play. Yo, he would have brought in another transfer. So we can now actually put it into the bucket of things that Lincoln Riley recruits from, like, on the regular. He takes a look at it. He says, I wonder, is there anything there that I want? Is there anything there that I think is better than what we got? And in Kyler Murray, yeah. And Jalen Hurts, all right, cool. 3,800 yards passing, nearly 1,300 yards rushing. Cool. 50 touchdowns, yeah, all right. And then there's this thing with the pandemic that he is factoring in where he's quoted and said, it's probably been a better year that this pandemic happened now and not last year because these guys understand our system. They've seen it, been in it, they've taken reps. For them, it's just about getting on the field and getting those game reps and getting into the flow of that. It's going to be fun to watch these two cats compete, and we feel like we've got some good pieces around them. There are lots of folks that are betting on the Spencer Rattler experience at Oklahoma, and for good reason, because if you've seen him spin it, you know how talented he is. You know that when he flips his wrist, the ball goes 50 yards. You know that if he crow hops, the ball goes 70 yards. He sees the field well. He has a tremendous rapport with his wide receivers. He's an easy guy to root for and to follow. If anything, the only weakness in his game is he might be a little too confident. He might be a little overconfident. But you know who else was overconfident? Baker Mayfield. Passed 3,700 yards his first year at Oklahoma, and then 4,000 to 4,000, threw 43 touchdowns in his Heisman season, right? Which I still think was Oklahoma's best opportunity to win a national championship since winning a national championship in 2000. He was the number 1 rated pro-style quarterback and the number 11 player in the overall rankings in the 2019 247 Sports Composite. I also just take a look at that Arizona recruiting class, like that state of Arizona recruiting class, and I need to remind everybody, Rattler wasn't even the best dude in it, according to some, out of the state of Arizona, because Jake Smith was there. Guy's going to play slot at Texas next year. He's already there, but he's going to take over for Devin Duvernay. That was the National Gatorade Player of the Year and the Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year in a season where Rattler broke the state passing record for career passing yards. Like, I'm so excited about OU Texas for the foreseeable future because both of these teams have been recruiting their butts off offensively, and with Bijan Robinson also joining up with Texas in that 2020 class, 5-star tailback. According to some, it's better than Zach Evans. And when you average 17 yards per carry, yeah, I get it. Also, Keely Ringo coming out of Saguaro in Arizona. Number 1 cornerback in the 2020 class, headed to Georgia. And then Jacoby Covington coming out of Saguaro, headed up to Washington. We'll see what happens with Damian Sellers, but goodness me, Mark Andrews coming out of that place. And now Noah Nelson in the 2020 class for Oklahoma. Arizona's been putting out some hitters. If I was doing radio in Arizona, I'd probably be going after Kevin Sumlin and Herm Edwards, being like, how you let these kids keep leaving the state? And probably come back with, hey, man, we ain't let them do anything. Also, add to this, Austin, Texas is closer to Charlotte, North Carolina than it is to Phoenix, Arizona. That's still a wild fact to me. And yet, Texas reaches in that way, and Oklahoma reaches in that way. And when you're talking about quarterbacks, you're talking about Lincoln Riley. So knowing that he was all in on going to the transfer portal tells us a lot about how we can take a look at future quarterback recruiting for Lincoln Riley, and might figure into what happens with Caleb Williams, both in the very near future, July 4th, when he's supposed to announce his commitment, and 2-3 years from now, if maybe perhaps Riley doesn't think that he's good enough to compete or win the job over another transfer that we don't even know about yet. Wildly interesting. Let's talk about Oklahoma football. Let's talk about Alex Grinch. Let's talk about recruiting. Matt, listen here. One of my favorite video games is called Destiny. In it, one of the objectives is to build a character with the best armor and weapons possible while acquiring the stick skills needed to save the world from aliens. You get to that goal by acquiring raw materials that you can turn in or use to create more valuable armor and weapons. All right, so that's overly simplistic, and my Destiny brethren are like, yo, man, it's way more than that. I get it, but for the purposes of what we're doing right now, that's as far as we need to go, right? It's just long enough to set up the point that we all need to acknowledge when paying attention to what Grinch is doing in his evaluation, his recruiting, and his earning of commitments from prospects, particularly in this 2021 class. So, in this cycle, Grinch has marked the defense with size, length, and speed. He's also not looked the least bit interested in how much, or more to the point, how little football a recruit has played. But we can also see that he got a top 60 kiddo in Clayton Smith and a top 100 kiddo in Ethan Downs. So he's not going to turn down nothing but his collar if he can get to those players. However, in Smith, he earned a pledge from a player who can play 4 positions: Mike, Will, Rush, and End. In the scheme for his Texas high school Tigers and Texarkana, the man can go get you a first down from the numbers on 3rd and long, and then come back on the next possession and pass rush with the best in the country. Then, add to that, he's 6'4", which is the same height as Jordan Mooks, who's a defensive back, right? About 50 pounds lighter. So while Smith is polished, right, at least as a pass rusher, Mooks remains raw enough that it's difficult to project how good he could be at one of the 5 defensive back positions in Grinch's scheme. But his length and size allow for options and growth. I submit to you, find me a 6'4" defensive back. When you do, tell Isaiah Simmons I said hi. All right. The same can be said, right, of defensive end Nathan Rollins-Kybonge and how he has just played a year of football. As a matter of fact, he was committed to play basketball at Washington State the summer before last. 6'7", 260 pounds, near 7-foot wingspan, could be an elite defensive end or defensive tackle in Grinch's scheme. And where most would knock this lack of experience as a player, Grinch sees raw materials. The raw materials needed to develop a player capable of helping his defensive philosophy reach its full potential. That's how this class is shaping, right? It's one where instead of seeing right away what a player could slot into, we'll have to watch how each player develops and how the scheme is adjusted to suit each one of them individually. Remember, Grinch does this. Took a 6'2", 254-pound prospect named Hercules Mataafa and turned him into a consensus All-American Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, Polynesian College Football Player of the Year at defensive tackle. Just give Grinch raw material and wait. Now, to that end, this ain't Washington State, I know. Recruiting 2-star and 3-star players is not what Oklahoma is and who Oklahoma is. And when you look at Ethan Downs and you look at Clayton Smith, you'll see that he gets blue chip players when he can. However, acknowledging that this scheme is also sort of a unicorn in college football is important, because it's essentially a 3-down lineman, 1-gap scheme, which means that particularly interesting in it is the poignancy of it can be so many different things based on down and distance. It can be a 3-3-5. It can be a 4-2-5. It can be a 3-4. It can be 4-3. It can run 4 defensive backs or 5. The only thing that I have not seen this defense run with is a strong side linebacker, Sam. But that's usually just the safety dropping down to that position. So in many ways, getting closer to positionless football is what Alex Grinch is doing. While also going, the only things that I need them to be are fast and long. And in recruiting speed, cool, you get to be fast. But when you can't recruit speed, you make them skinnier. Because when you make them skinnier, they move quicker. And understanding that not everybody's going to have the size and the speed that a Neville Gallimore has is important. The thing that I think folks missed about Mike Stoops' defense when it did work was that it was wildly dependent on Jordan Phillips. And to some degree, Jordan Wade. But when it was humming, it's Jordan Phillips eating blocks and it's Eric Stryker edge rushing. You needed both of those things working in concert for that thing to work, because you're putting enormous amounts of stress on 4 of the 5 offensive linemen with 2 players. Think about that. That's 2 players occupying 4 men's attention. The idea that you're going to be able to recruit to that year in and year out is nonsensical. It's not going to happen. So the moment that Jordan Phillips goes in the second round to, I think it's the Buffalo Bills at the time, or maybe it's the Dolphins. I think it's Dolphins. You see how big a deal it is to lose him. And the reason I'm bringing up Jordan Phillips is because when I talk about elite athleticism and size and speed, remember Jordan Phillips is the dude that can do a standing backflip. Okay? It's a 300-pound man that can do a standing back. I don't think there are that many 300-pound men that can do that. We're talking about mutants. Like Fletcher Cox with the Philadelphia Eagles. That dude could do 22 pull-ups at over 300 pounds. There's a reason why he is a coveted player in college and in the NFL. Also looking at the defensive tackle recruiting, just as a rule, there ain't that many of them. And the ones that there are usually choose Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma when we can get them, Alabama, Florida, LSU, teams that you expect to play in the college football playoff. Oklahoma's primarily been able to do this offensively, right? Making itself into quarterback U when it was simply RBU. And is able to do this at a time when it felt like the rest of college football was catching up offensively. Because as soon as the SEC started going to air raid concepts around about 2013, that's when the gap starts to close, because they've already got the defenses to compete with. And when you can run Kirby Smart's defense, which he called the cat defense, which is the same defense they kind of sort of run now with Pete Golden at Alabama, what that meant was our cats are better than your cats. Our safeties can match up in the slot, and our nose guards can eat up 3 men. We keep our linebackers clean to make plays. Roquan Smith seeking whom he may destroy. Take a look at that LSU defense. Like, we put so much emphasis on the offense, but if Tyler Shelvin isn't caving in the middle and giving Creed Humphrey all kinds of problems, it might be a different game. In the same way that if Bravion Roy was not caving in the middle, perhaps Oklahoma doesn't go down by 25 and have to come back. All of these things are important. All of these things work together for a sauce that I think we all need to acknowledge.